So just like yesterday, Friday evening was Bhakti Vriksha Plus. They'll expand it. So this is Bhakti Vriksha group members plus more. How many persons present are a little on the newer side to the practice of devotional service and Krishna consciousness like we're doing? A little bit newer, on the newer side? Okay. The group that meets here regularly, the topic that's being discussed presently is Chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. Yes? Yes. Chapter 2 Bhagavad Gita. And Chapter 2 Bhagavad Gita, the subject matter, well, the title of it is Contents of the Gita Summarized. So if you can understand Chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, you can understand the whole of Bhagavad Gita in a summary form, and then it's expanded and further expanded. But the two main subjects in Chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita are Sankhya Yoga and Buddhi Yoga. What's Sankhya Yoga?
Analytical study of matter and spirit.
Very good. Yes. So I'm going to show in a little bit, do a little presentation here, but the number of people, I mentioned this on Friday evening, the number of persons who, rather, the percentage of Americans today, those living in America, the percentage of them that believe in the soul is 80%. And in 1981, George Gallup Jr., the chairman of the Department of Statistics at Princeton University, did a study, and the study was 21% of the Americans in 1981 accepted the presence of the soul. That's a pretty big jump from 1981 to the year 2000. And the research attributes two main factors. Immigration of people from the eastern part of the world to America, who have that conception already. And another was the increasing body of evidence, not proof, but evidence that there is such a thing as a soul distinct from matter. Now, modern science doesn't teach that. Modern science teaches there's only one thing. This is mechanistic science. And that's matter. And the laws that govern matter go along with matter, and that's all there is. And anything that exists can be explained based upon matter and the laws that govern matter. There isn't a second thing or a third thing. That's all there is. So, all of us, to one degree or another, have some education. Looking around the room, probably like a lot of years of study in the academic halls of the world, U.S. and America, the U.S. and India. And it doesn't teach about the soul. But somehow there's this conviction that there's a soul. Now, what the nature of the soul is starts getting fuzzy for different people who have different ideas of what the soul is. In fact, in my 40-something years of serving Srila Prabhupada in the role of his devotee, I've encountered hilarious varieties of conceptions of what the soul is. And because I want to do this other presentation, I won't go into a laughter session, but it's like really a riot. So many different. So of those 80% that say they believe in the soul, it's not the soul that we believe in. But they have some idea. So just like on Friday evening, the group, Bhakti Vriksha group, is studying chapter 9 Bhagavad Gita. And so we discussed the verse Yad karoshi, yad asnasi, yad jahosi, dadasi, yad tapasyasi kaunteya, tat karasha madarpanam. So that madarpanam is a very important part. There are many different conceptions of what madarpanam means. Like, start with impersonal and personal. And then there's varieties of both. And then subdivisions and further divisions. So, if one has a misconception of who you should offer everything unto as a form of worship, the result is going to be different than that which is actually supreme. And the tendency to worship, according to Krishna's indication to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, it's there. It's intrinsic to the soul. If someone doesn't worship God, they'll worship something. And according to where they worship, they have a different destination. Yanti deva vrata devan. Pitkin yanti pritin vrataha. Bhutani yanti bhute. So some persons are ghost worshippers. It's like becoming a trendy thing from the Harry Potter movies and all the other stuff that's going on. There's a lot of like fascination with witches. You might be surprised. One day your child comes home from school and what? You're worshipping witches? Wait a minute. But there's another destination for those who worship. Those who worship Krishna. And they go to Krishna. Those who worship Krishna go to Krishna. So same with the soul. If we're going to make a distinction between spirit and matter, as Krishna is teaching in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Sankhya, then we need a right conception. And so the topic that I was asked to speak about was a how-to question, but I thought I'll do the what question before we do the how-to question. How to transform material consciousness or material conception of life to the spiritual conception of life. That's the how-to. Like there's a magic switch and you just have to know the secret password and you get into that special information data and esoteric and just pull the switch and boom, you're in the spiritual conception. That's not how it works. It's an open secret. It's a matter, the how-to is practicing sadhana bhakti in a proper way and just putting it in simple terms, Prabhupada's expression. As the sun rises in the morning, simultaneously you can see yourself and you can see the sun. In abject darkness, you can't see yourself. Even if you have a mirror, you can't see yourself. You can't even see the mirror, or to speak of the reflection in the mirror. But when the sun rises, you can see the sun, you can see yourself. Similarly, God realization and self-realization, they occur gradually and simultaneously. So the process of God realization is to awaken that's the how-to switch. Practice sadhana bhakti very carefully, and the consciousness of our real identity, especially when it's guided by proper spiritual conception, becomes reality, and the darkness is dispelled and the light comes on. There's all this language used in Vedanta Sutra commentaries by our acharyas when they refer to things like pots and plates, and describing what Maya is. And Maya is not seeing anything, or seeing something that's not what is there. And it's all due to illusion or darkness. And when there's no darkness is gone, the light is there, then you can see things such as pots and plates. In other words, you can see differences, distinctions. You can see variety within this material world, distinct from who you are. You're not a pot or a plate. You can see matter and spirit, distinct, as God consciousness awakens. But that requires right concept of God and right concept of spirit, the soul. So before you do maybe you know these three terms, Sambandha Gyan, Abhideya Gyan, and Prayojana Gyan. If you don't, I'll explain them, and if you do, you'll just remember them. According to the discussion that Lord Chaitanya had with the Mayavad sannyasi Prakashananda Saraswati, there are three divisions of subject matters within all of the Vedas. You can like 1, 2, 3. 3 buckets. Sambandha means relationship, same as the Hindi word. Sambandha means relationship. Everything comes from a source. That source is the absolute truth, and everything that comes from the source has a relationship with the source. And understanding the relationship of all things with their source is Sambandha Gyan. So, when souls, the next category is when souls act within that relationship, that constitutes Abhideya, actions within the relationship with the Supreme. So, performing devotional service. How to perform devotional service is Abhideya, Gyan. And then the fruit of acting in one's relationship with the Supreme, up to the stage of love of God, Prema, Prayojana, it's in the category of Prayojana Gyan. So, relationship, acting in the relationship, the fruit of that relationship. Those are the three categories. Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. So before we go to the how-to, that's the Abhideya, the middle one, let's do the what. What's the nature of the soul? In fact, to help, something that Srila Prabhupada expressed on a number of occasions, but very strongly in relation to his translation of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, was that because the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is presenting Vedic cosmology. What's cosmology? It's a description of what's up there in the sky, the structure of the universe. That's cosmology. So the Vedic picture of cosmology is in the 5th canto, and Prabhupada was very strong in his purports of what the Vedic cosmology says, and comparing it or contrasting it with what mechanistic science says, and he turned a few heads and spun a few minds, and even amongst his own followers, like, hey, what's going on? This isn't what we learned in 8th grade science class. It's very different. And then Prabhupada explained the reason for that reaction is that not just in the Western world, but, Western world gets a big, contribution in this area. What modern science says, people have practically blind faith. Like the scientists criticize the religionists that they have blind faith in God, but the religionists look at the scientists and say, you have blind faith in the scientist says. And then the response to that is, well, why do you say that? Look at all the wonderful things that science has done over the number of years, and if science says there's no soul, then, prove to me that there's soul. Well, wait a minute, how about proving that there's no soul? The burden of proof becomes over on this side, that prove that there is. We can use a standoff, prove that there isn't. So, because there is such a strong faith, confidence in science says, I've put together a presentation that where science says, at least evidence that's in modern science, that there is a soul. Not proof, but evidence in that direction. I'll do one that's like, science says. In ancient, not only Vedic, but Eastern cosmology, the conception of the universe is geocentric. Geo means the earth. So with the earth at the center, describing where the planets are in the cosmos is described in geocentric terms. And that was fine until Copernicus came along. And Copernicus said, boo, hiss, no. The earth isn't the center, the sun is the center. And the planets are moving around the sun. So the Copernican model, displaced and trashed the geocentric model. And in Copernicus's time, he'd said other things like the size of the moon is X, and the distance between the earth and the sun is Y. So over a period of time, because he developed a telescope and he could see and said the distance is, this is the distance and that's the size. So as time passed from the time of Copernicus, they built better telescopes, and Y became a very different number, because the number that they say today was off by a factor of something like 180. That's a pretty big factor. And then, at this point in time, the Hubble telescopes that are mounted on spacecraft and sending around zoom, 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 and send pictures back, and they can, based on where they are, they can take a measurement of where they are, what the picture says, and the distance is what it is today according to the Vedic model of the distance between the earth and the sun, and the size of the sun and the size of the earth. Okay? So the numbers match, but what about geocentric and heliocentric? How come the Vedic model says geocentric? Geocentric means from your point of observation is the earth, and then the movements of the heavenly bodies are in terms of your point of observation. So I'm going to do a little hand motion thing because I don't have a chart with me, so just you have to watch my hands. Here's the earth, and there's the motion of the moon that's moving around the earth. Yes? So, and over here is the sun, big sun, and the earth over here, and the moon moving around the earth. Now listen carefully. If you were to make a map, here's the sun, here's the earth moving around the sun, we're looking at it from the top down, vertical, and then you're going to map the moon that moves around the earth as the earth moves around the sun. So the earth is moving like this, and the moon is moving like this, but you're just mapping the moon. What does the map look like? It's a spiral, or a helix. Now keep doing that like hundreds and thousands of times. And what do you get? You get an inner tube. Or if it's just flat, you get a ring, an outer and inner ring. But sometimes it's higher altitude, lower altitude, so it comes out like, lifesaver or a tube. Right? That's if you're mapping the moon as the moon moves around the earth as the earth goes around the sun. Okay? Now, clear your mind, wipe the slate clean. Now we'll do step 2. Step 2 is the Vedas describe, and modern astronomy, Western astronomy, describes that not only the Earth is moving around the sun, but the sun is moving once a year on an ecliptic plane. That's what it's called, ecliptic. And it moves from the northern direction down to the southern part of this Earth planet. For those people in the northern hemisphere, the southernmost point is Makara Sankranti, or depends on where you are. What's it? Isn't the other name in South India? Pongal? So, January 14th. That's the date. It's a solar date. It doesn't change because it's when the sun is in the southernmost. And then it goes up, and then it crosses the equator where days and nights are equal. So that's an equinox. And and goes up to the summer solstice, where the sun is in the northernmost position, June 14th or something like that. And then crosses the equator again, days and nights are equal. So days are longest, nights are longest, and then there's the equinox in the course of 1 year. So, in addition to the Earth's moving, the sun is moving in relation to the Earth. Okay, now, if you were looking at here's the Earth at the center of a circle, and the sun is moving on its ecliptic once a year, slowly, once a year, and other planets are moving, let's say Mars is moving around the sun. As the sun is moving around the Earth, you map out Mars, the motion of Mars, what do you get? A helix or spiral, and then you do it many times, and you get two circles with an inner and outer edge. Yes? Same thing. From the perspective of the Earth, what's the motion of Mars or Venus or Jupiter, Saturn, or all the planets as they move around the Earth, as they move around the sun, as the sun is moving around the Earth? Geocentric model. So you take those inner and outer limits, and you look at those numbers of the distance that Mars is from the Earth, and you get the numbers that are what modern science says the numbers are. Or actually it's the other way around. It's what modern science is getting closer and closer to the Vedic model. With precise numbers. You know, the measure was yojanas. And we use miles, and somebody else might use kilometers, and you can have some other, terminology. But when you do the math, it comes out. And so the Vedas describe this Bhu Mandala, that's the Earth plane, the plane of the upper, middle, and lower planetary systems where the Earth resides is Bhu Mandala. And it describes where there's a central island, and then an ocean, and then a circular island, which you never see circular islands, and then with an inner and outer diameter, and then another ocean, and then a circular island. And those islands are numerically the inner and the outer orbits of the motions of the different planets as the planets are moving around the sun, as the sun is moving around the Earth. You got it? Cool, huh? Geocentric. With practically a one-to-one correlation with modern science says that's heliocentric model of where the planets are in space according to the math that you say where they are in space, away from the sun and similar. You can map. It's relative motion, and you can just have a different set of numbers or different equation when you plug the numbers in, and you do the math, and it comes out the right numbers. Geocentric or heliocentric. The unique thing is, the Vedic conclusion was not reached by use of Hubble telescopes. It used the unassisted eye And you're not going to get anything close to those numbers. Even with a crude telescope, it's 180 times off. So how did they get those numbers? And the answer is by descending knowledge. As the whole of the Vedas comes by descending knowledge. So modern science has its, modern astronomy has its technology where they can detect distances more accurately than they could previously. And similarly, I'm going to show you a little presentation where modern science gives some stronger indication about the presence of the soul than it did in 1981 when George Gallup made his poll and 21% of the population in America said, we believe that there's a soul. Okay, so we're going to show this picture right here. If those of you that are back there and can't see this wall, there's some space right here. There's like a lot of space right here. And if you don't want to see the picture, that's okay too. And especially for the kids that are in the front row, this is going to be, part of this is going to be like a science class. So I hope you don't mind. I mean, it's a Saturday, and why should you be going to a science class on a Saturday? But I hope you like it. And I'll try to go slowly, at least when it comes to the science things, and like explain it in simple language. Who's that a picture of? Benjamin Franklin. And he's on a $100 bill. He's such an important guy. At least in America, he's an important guy in the history of America. Now, why would I show you a picture of a $100 bill? Because Benjamin Franklin is one of the persons in American history who had a strong conviction in reincarnation, or the existence of the soul beyond the body. Oh, because that was another. In the year 2000, those persons that accepted that there's a soul was around 80%, and those that accepted there's existence of the soul beyond this life, or there's life after this life, it was almost the same number. I don't. If you say that you believe in the soul, but it doesn't exist after this life, I don't know what that conviction is, but it goes out of existence after you die, but there's a soul. Anyway, it was something like 76%. So Benjamin Franklin was ahead of his times. When he was just a teenager, mind you, he drafted this epitaph that is on his gravestone. The body of B. Franklin, printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here food for worms. But the work shall not be lost, for it will be, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more elegant edition, corrected and improved by the author. He was a teenager when he wrote this. And throughout his life he had deep conviction in reincarnation. The British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, this is for a Western audience, different audience, we have different people here. Henry Ford was a strong believer in reincarnation, as is his grandson, Ambarish, Alfred Ford. Plato, of course, very strong believer in soul beyond this body. Charles Dickens, you'll have to read some of Charles Dickens' writings probably in your high school English classes. So he was a strong believer in reincarnation. The Russian author Leo Tolstoy, Immanuel Kant in Western Europe, Rudyard Kipling, more modern writer, Aldous Huxley, and he isn't a believer in reincarnation exactly. He's as I described. So this is a slide that for the presentation is saying his 1981 results and then the year 2000 results, and the reasons are immigration of Eastern origin persons into America who have that conviction, and science. So the immigration number is not like, doesn't account for 60% increase. It's the scientific portion. So now we're going to go to some earlier science, to the Renaissance time. René Descartes, very handsome man, who was a Frenchman, and what do you know from science class, from math class about René Descartes? Pythagorean theorem? Is that? Yeah. Okay. Well, he was also a scientist and also an author, and he was very interested in what's called, in the realm of science, the mind-body problem. Now, at the end of, they're going to play a little video clip where Sadhuputta is narrating and he's explaining René Descartes had this idea that there's a distinction between the mind and the body, and the two interact. But he couldn't prove it, and so towards the end, modern science just laughed him off and dismissed the whole thing. But that was like an early stage presentation of the mind-body problem. So here it is. This isn't the soul and body, but it's just the mind and body. And even that, the Renaissance people had a problem with.
This brings us naturally to the idea that consciousness involves a non-physical entity that is able to sense material patterns and tie them together in a unified awareness of self. Such an idea was introduced by René Descartes in the 17th century. According to Descartes, there are two kinds of substances: matter, or res extensa, and mind, or res cogitans. Matter has geometrical properties involving extension in space, and mind is characterized by thinking, feeling, and conscious awareness. Descartes proposed that the mind interacts with the body. Sense perception involves the transmission of information from the body to the mind, and willed action involves the transmission of information from the mind to the body. Descartes speculated that the center of mind-body interaction might be the pineal gland situated in the center of the head. Over the years, scientists and philosophers have been unable to make any progress in understanding how a non-physical mind might interact with the physical body. As a result, they have tended to reject this idea in preference for purely mechanical theories of the mind.
Okay, that was a quick rendering. So, fast forward over time, and there has been a renewed interest in consciousness, and this gentleman pictured here is Dr. John Searle, a physicist who had a theory that says actually consciousness is just an inherent property of matter. And he called it the supervene theory. So it's just like when consciousness is when matter is in a certain state, consciousness kind of squirts out of it, like a sponge, and there's water, and you squeeze the sponge and all the water comes out. It's already there in the sponge, it just has to be squeezed. The supervene theory. Then a fellow physicist, of course, had to disagree with him. And William Seeger said, just like you take the example of ice, so in one condition it's water, in another condition it's ice, but there has to do with the structure of water at a certain temperature. It has a lattice structure and it makes it for ice. And in the temperature of water, there's no lattice structure, so it isn't hard. So, but that's a property of matter. There's nothing known about the property of neurons that supervenes and squirts out consciousness from the neurons. So here's a little video that talks about this, and I'm going to describe it a little bit ahead of time, just very briefly. It's called the articles that describe it called the Chinese room game. It was the counter-argument that William Seeger gave. He said, for example, supposing you set a bunch of people, American people, in a room at desks, and then you tell each person in that series of groups, when you receive a slip of paper, you make a mark like this. Then you pass that on to the next person, you make a mark like that. Pass it on to the next person, you make a mark like something else. And it goes around the whole room, and at the other end, you get a Chinese paragraph. All they're doing is making a mark on a slip of paper. And so if you say that consciousness is a series of neurons producing events that make consciousness, then it would be equivalent to making marks on paper because all that the neurons are doing, or computers are doing, when MIT and other places for several decades were trying to make artificial intelligence. It's a behavior, but it's not consciousness that's being exhibited. Neurons don't exhibit consciousness, and he gave the Chinese room game as an example, and here it is explained briefly in the video.
If we accept the reality of consciousness, we can ask the question, can a machine be conscious? The philosopher John Sura has thrown interesting light on this question by presenting the following argument. Consider the computer that duplicates the brain activity of Mr. Jones. Suppose that it is conscious, just as Mr. Jones himself would be. The important thing about this computer is its logical structure, which duplicates the logical structure of Mr. Jones' brain. This same logical structure can be embodied in a computer consisting of a large group of people seated at desks. In accordance with certain simple rules, each person receives slips of paper from his neighbors, makes marks on them, and passes them to other neighbors. By setting up the rules properly, this group of people will precisely duplicate all of the operations of the Jones computer. Just as the Jones computer duplicates Mr. Jones' brain, so this group of people collectively duplicates both the Jones computer and Mr. Jones' brain. Does the group of people manifest the consciousness of Mr. Jones? Each individual in the group knows only his own activities of making marks on pieces of paper, and we can suppose that he does not even know the purpose of the group as a whole. Surely the consciousness of Mr. Jones is not present in any of the individuals in the group, but is it present in the group as a whole? It seems most reasonable to suppose that in fact, the only consciousness in the group of people is that of the individuals that make it up. But if this is so, then what can we say about the Jones computer? Shouldn't we conclude that it also lacks consciousness and is simply producing behavior by a mechanical process? Finally, what about Mr. Jones' brain? What special feature does it have that creates the conscious experience of Mr. Jones? Its logical structure as a computer is the same as that of the Jones computer and the group of people. It only differs from them in the way its operations are carried out, by nerve impulses instead of by electrical currents in semiconductors or by the passing of written notes. A nerve cell builds up an electrical potential between its inside and its outside. A nerve impulse involves a localized flow of ions across the cell membrane that neutralizes this electrical potential.
I'm going to stop there because it's like a lot of information. For those of you that have a medical background, you know what was just said. Or those that have a little bit more of a science background know what was just said. This is a wave propagation down a cell wall, where on one side of the cell membrane is a positive charge, the other side is a negative charge, and so to neutralize those positive negative charges, a signal propagates down the length of the neuron. This is what modern science say is all consciousness is this. It's a neutralization of a positive charge and a negative charge across the cell wall, the cell membrane. That's all it is. And there's a series of those, and you put them together, and the collective phenomena is what you guys that are sentimental call consciousness. So what's going on here is he's showing, just as a computer may make a behavior, you can create a computer. They did it. They made a computer that plays chess. But it's only based upon how the computer is programmed. When it detects something, then based on the capacity of the person that did the programming to know programming and know how to play chess, he can input it and it can make the behavior, but it can't make discriminations. It can only conduct a behavior that's input in it. It's not conscious. So neurons making propagating of waves down the cell membrane, or a computer, or the Chinese room making mark. It's just a behavior, making a mark on a slip of paper, passing it on. Same thing. It's a 1 or a 0, pass it on. In computer technology. And same thing in the neuron. So where is consciousness in all this? Where is Mr. Jones, as he's saying, the consciousness of Mr. Jones? That's the argument he's making.
As this flow takes place, it triggers a similar flow in adjacent parts of the membrane. Thus, an electrical signal propagates down the length of the cell. From a computational point of view, the important thing is that some kind of signal is sent. The particular mechanism does not matter. The same thing can be said about the switching functions carried out by neurosynapses. The theory of the brain as a computer holds that only the logical arrangement of neural interconnections is important in determining human mental functions. We have seen that this logical structure does not account for consciousness. Could it be that consciousness is a product of the particular physiochemical structure of neurons? Actually, there is no more reason to associate consciousness with this cellular machinery than there is to associate it with the amplifier and photocell of the red light machine.
I'm going to show you a picture of a red light machine in a moment, but maybe I'll just do that. I'll just go to the red light machine. There's a red light machine. And the argument of the red light machine is, I actually had somebody, a devotee named Vidyabhusan, a godbrother of mine, made one for me for presentations at colleges. It was bigger than this one. It was like, I carried in a big box. But it had the same elements. There was a camera lens, so that receives light. And then behind the camera lens, there's these cables that were hooked up to photosensitive or light-sensitive chips. So that is, if the frequency of light was yellow, it would activate that chip. If it was green, it would activate the green chip. If it was blue, it would activate the blue chip. And then that wafer, the chip, sent a signal to an amplifier. And then the amplifier did 3 different things. Well, it did 2 different things. You could make it talk, too. It printed out on a strip of paper like this, I see a red light, I see a blue light, I see a green light, I see whatever the color light is. Or then another was a digital message went up, I see a red light. So it was a behavior. Or you can get it to say it, program it to say it, I see a red light. Now, looking at the machine, where's consciousness? Where's that event of conscious awareness taking place in the machine? There's a behavior that's computational, and there's a perception of light, but where's consciousness? In the mechanistic view, consciousness doesn't have a place. That's the point of the red light machine. So where's conscious awareness? We know that there is such a thing as conscious awareness, and one explanation of it is it's just mechanistic. It's just a neurological event. You folks that talk about consciousness, humbug. All it is electrochemical events in the brain. Nothing else. So he's going through the little exercise, little rigorous, but you get the message, I hope, that the neurological events is not, in principle, from a computational point, not any different than what the artificial intelligence folks have been doing to try to simulate consciousness, or the Chinese room game. Where's the consciousness of Mr. Jones in that room full of people? It's not there. Nor is it there in the robot, nor is it there in the brain, or the neurons of the brain. It's something else. And some of the something else's, here's some other evidence. You know of this name, Dr. Michael Sabam, from Emory University, from the little book that the DBT has published called Beyond Birth and Death. No, not Beyond Birth and Death. What's the title of the book? Life After Death. Life After Death. Is that it?
Life comes from life.
Life
comes from life.
No, not life comes from life. The picture is shown. It's this picture here. Where's that picture?
Coming back.
Coming back. Okay. Dr. Michael Sabam is pictured, written about in Coming Back. So here's the doctor, and he had an associate. I don't think it was at Emory University, but another university, an esteemed surgeon, heart surgeon, who wrote his books, and it's based upon. Dr. Michael Sabam's writing is after about 12 years of research. Something happened during open heart surgery one time that blew his mind. It was a patient had cardiac arrest, and they did the procedure to get his heart to start pumping again by artificial means, and his heart started beating of its own accord after that. And he survived the cardiac arrest and the heart surgery. And at the end, recovery time, the doctor went to see his patient and asked him how he was feeling, and he said, "I feel great," and described the whole event of the cardiac arrest. And doctor said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Yes, I was up on top hovering up above the operating table, looking down," and he described in detail what happened. The little meter said heart stopped, and the assistant said to the secretary, to the nurse, "Get those electrodes and place them on his chest." And they did that, and certain things happened. And the doctor said this and that. Just described in detail what happened and how long it took, and then what they did after that. And then Dr. Sabam said, "This is impossible. How's he must be making this up. There must be some explanation for this besides." So he took it seriously. And then he started researching and found that there were other patients that had similar experiences. And then it started being given a name, out-of-body experience. And then they gave an acronym for it, OBE. No, it is America. OBE. And he studied it for a number of years, and he wrote a book about it. And he explained, I wanted to debunk this idea. I looked to see maybe it's too much carbon dioxide and there's some hallucination, maybe it's too much oxygen, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and did experiments and found it wasn't any of those things. The conclusion is there's the seat of consciousness, like this picture. The seat of consciousness is something different than the body, and it's certainly different than the neurons of the body, because when there's cardiac arrest, what happens is the blood doesn't go to the brain. The neurological events don't happen because the blood isn't flowing, because there's cardiac arrest. It's like not even possible. And still that there's conscious awareness when there's no neurological events? There's got to be another explanation. The seat of consciousness is something else, whatever that something else is. So these two doctors wrote their books, and didn't do an exhaustive study, but there's something like 20, 25 MDs, reputable people, not like, silly people, who have done similar studies of out-of-body experiences specific with cardiac arrest. This is another physician, Dr. David Ray Griffin. Won't give you all the details. Here's one where Dr. Kimberly Clark Sharp, University of Washington in Seattle. I like one of the stories. The first event that happened to her was a patient reported that survived cardiac arrest. They were on the operating table, and they described how they floated up above the operating table, went to the ceiling, went across the ceiling, out a window, and up 2 flights outside the operating room, and they were looking eyeball to eyeball with a pair of sneakers that were outside the janitor's room on a little ledge. And she thought, this is ridiculous. So she got the janitor, and she described, the patient described what was inside the janitor's room. And so he went to the janitor and said, can you open your room and tell me? And he said, I put a new lock on it. I just rearranged it. So as the woman described, then they looked. There is a ledge outside the window of the janitor's room, but you can't see it from inside. You have to be outside. And there was a pair of sneakers. And the lady described, they had different color shoelaces, and there was a rip in the toe of one of the sneakers, like details that you can't see unless you're outside. So Dr. Kimberly Clark Sharp said, this is ridiculous. What's the explanation for this? And she began researching and came to a similar conclusion, that the seat of consciousness is something other than the neurological events that take place in the brain. These two gentlemen from different countries, this one I think is from Sweden and this one is from Iceland, and they collaborated and they studied 438 different cases. Let's go to the... No. Then we want to keep it. There we go. So this is what happened. This Carlos Osis is an American psychologist, and he and his friend studied 442 deathbed experiences in the USA and 435 in India, where persons had this out-of-body experience in their deathbed, and they came to a similar conclusion. And these are things that people described when they came back from their out-of-body experiences. This long tunnel with some light at the end, and figures with wings flying in the air, and light and illumination, very, very brilliant, practically blinding, and so forth. So, I'll go quickly. This is a photograph. This is another of beyond the body. There's life. This is a photograph of a spirit or ghost standing at a railing, because this particular spirit or ghost was known to be in a certain area, and photographer got a picture of her. And here's a medium. I met a medium the other day. Won't tell you where, but they're able to, other than their own voice or their own consciousness, express and experience the consciousness of some other beings. So here's the coming back cover, where the picture is as the one exits this world and the later stage of life, when the soul comes back again in some other form. And right here we're in Virginia, right?
Yes.
So Ian Stevenson is with the University of Virginia, I believe, and here he is a little younger than he was then than he is today, and he did a lot of study on persons remembering their previous lives. And this is a famous one that existed who was very prominent in the 1930s from India, before he started his work. And later he came and looked at all the records and found it quite in order. But this is, let's see, Shanti, who previously was Swarnalata, and that it gives the statistics about her life. But when she was just a small girl, like 3 years old, she was describing that my name isn't Swarnalata, my name is Shanti. No, the other way around. My name is not Shanti, my name is Swarnalata. And she described all kinds of things about her life as Swarnalata, who was her husband's name, where she lived, what her husband did, what was in the house, the names of the relatives, and just went on and on. A little 3-year-old girl that one might take as just a babbling of a small child, but just like continued and continued and continued. And so as they listened to what she said, they found the name of what she said was her husband, and so without telling their little girl, they brought the husband, who is now, a grown-up man, and she's a little 3-year-old girl. As soon as he walked into the house unannounced, there he is, there's my husband. Immediately. And then they were amazed, and so they had her go to the house. That's this picture here. And when she went to the house, she got bewildered. She went right from the train station, walked straight to the house, and when she got to the house, she was bewildered because they had remodeled the house after she left, and the door was now on the side instead of in the front. So when they went inside the house, she was able to identify the details of the house, where she died, the name of the doctor that treated her. She pointed him out of a crowd of people. That's the doctor that treated me. And this is the husband that came and visited unannounced, and immediately she recognized. When she went into the house, she immediately recognized her brother and her husband and her son. And there was a little box in the house where they had some rupees. It was hidden that only the husband and wife knew. So she identified where the box was, and the husband said, "Oh, I needed the money, I took the money." So things that you can't just like make it up. Here she's leading them from the train station to the house and identifying the people. So there are other persons. This is an American woman, Carol Bowman, whose little boy, Chase, at the age of 5, was having past life memories. And I've seen a YouTube video of this family, and then another family where the son was like a World War II pilot, and remembering all of those details. So Carol Bowman's son described a war zone where, this is his own little handwriting, where this is where he was, and then a cannon came in, and some military troops came in, and suddenly he got shot and he died. There was this opening for the soldiers to come in. The soldiers came in and he got shot. There's the cannon, the horse pulling the cannon. So it was from the Civil War era, and he was remembering in details. Higher, higher I go into the sky, after he was shot. So past life remembrances says, if I'm in this body today, but I can remember in detail life in a previous body, it says something. Consciousness is not the body. Here's 2 examples of another category of hypnotic regression, where Peter Ramster on the left is the voice that you're going to hear, and his very scruffy-looking companion there, Robert McGregor, who together worked on hypnotic regression. And here's 2 little video clips of this. And I'll just do a little preview. The woman that's lying is under hypnotic state, and she lives in Australia. She's never been out of Australia, and she starts describing in a previous life she was somebody in England. And she describes the town, the name, the family, the details, the place where she lived, a waterfall that had tiers and steps coming down, and where the house was in relation to that, where the window was in the house, and details and details and details